Anthropomorphize your tarot decks. There we go. So here's another interesting topic that I want to talk about. Anthropomorphizing your tarot decks. As in personifying your tarot decks as if they were real, as if they were a real entity, as if they were a person or a character. And I cannot pronounce that word properly. Let me look it up in the dictionary app. Anthropomorphize your tarot decks. There we go. Anthropomorphizing your tarot decks. Oh, fuck that shit. Okay, anyway, so I want to talk about personifying your tarot decks and talking about your tarot decks as if they're alive. So a lot of people seem to have issue with this. They don't really get it. They don't really understand why a pile of paper could have a personality or could reject you or could be blunt or stuff like that. So I just want to kind of chime in and I just want to talk about, maybe not chime in because that's Ben and Bill's thing. I will, is there like a conversational, is there a pun that means conversation that has to do with Fable Stand? I will talk about my opinions on this matter. Okay, so for me, I'll just tell you my views on tarot first. And for me, I agree that tarot is really just a deck of cards. It's a deck of cards. It's a deck of cards with symbols, with artwork on them, with images and symbols on them, and you can interpret those symbols however you want. You could use a tarot deck however you want. You can approach it however you want. You can have different kinds of perspectives, and you can have different kinds of worldviews, and la-di-da-di-da. So for me, a tarot deck is just a deck of cards. It's just cardboard and paper. I know that's very unromantic for a lot of you. I know that it sounds very scientific and it sounds almost demeaning to a deck of tarot cards, considering how much I talk about, you know, just how magical a tarot deck is. Okay, so here's the other part of the story. So I think, I quote actually, well I think, and this is a quote that I want to use from Brian Froud's Fairy Oracle. I forgot which one is the Heart of the Oracle or just the Fairy Oracle. But anyway, from one of the guidebooks, the authors wrote that this is a deck of cards. It's cardboard and paper, but this is where the magic is. Or maybe the magic is within you. And because the magic is within you and anything you touch becomes magic. So I'm just paraphrasing. The quote doesn't go exactly like that, but that's what I wanna, that's kind of what I think about tarot cards. I think this is just cardboard and cardstock. It's paper, like it's just physical paper, and it means nothing until you attribute meaning to it. So if you think tarot is a ritualistic tool, it's part of ritual, and you know, then that's what it is. If you think tarot cards, each card is an entity, each card embodies a spirit, and I think that's what it is. Like I don't mean like you imagine it to be so, or you think it to be so and it's true. I think just the fact that your belief will invite, if you believe that there is spirits residing in the tarot cards, I think the fact that you believe that, you kind of open up the space for that to take place. I think because you believe that, I think there will be spirits kind of just connecting with that belief perhaps, and then just start to exist in that manner. And I don't know, because I feel like this is like almost goes beyond the physical universe, so it's hard to explain and it's hard to prove right or wrong. But I think just like reality is very mysterious, yo. I think it's just definitely more than what the eye can see. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is it depends on what you believe. Like it depends on what you believe, and depends on like if you believe it's magical, then it is magical. I believe it's magical, so therefore it is magical. But do I believe that this deck itself has some kind of power and is its own identity, has its own sort of energetic consciousness or whatever? Not really, I don't. I believe that it's whatever that I want it to be. And sometimes I talk about it in personifying terms. You know, I talk about what the temper of a tarot deck is, what the spirit of a tarot deck is. You know, I talk about like what's the tone that this, you know, when it comes to readings, like the type of readings that this tarot deck gives. I talk about like, you know, I use languages that are sort of like personifying the tarot deck, but I think that's just a fun way to talk about tarot decks. I don't honestly believe that a tarot deck is alive. And I think when people say a tarot deck is very blunt or a tarot deck is very negative, I think that's just a way of saying the result of that reading and how you interpret the cards, how you interpret the tarot deck is the message is blunt or is very negative. I don't believe that tarot cards will intentionally be negative and blunt. And I think when you say a tarot deck is blunt, I think it's just the way you interpret those things, the way you interpret those messages comes out as very blunt. And also, the images that are present in that tarot deck inspire poignant and blunt interpretations from you. So for example, if you read with like the Happy Tarot, you wouldn't really describe it as blunt. You would probably describe it as very sweet, very positive, optimistic, and warm, because that's that's the mood of that deck, because of the images, because of the colors, because of the choices that the artist has made. It's to convey those feelings, it's to convey that tone. So when you're doing intuitive readings, especially when you engage with those images, that will be the type of message that comes out. That will be the tone that's carried out by those images, is because those images, the nature of those images are all of those things. They're sweet, they're warm, they're really positive, they're really optimistic. As opposed to if you read with the Deviant Moon Tarot, I've never personally worked with that deck because the images kind of creep the hell out of me. But if you read with the Deviant Moon Tarot, I'm pretty sure you won't say it's sweet, fluffy, positive, or optimistic. Or you would use a different set of descriptors or adjectives to describe the tone of that deck. So if you know what I mean. So I think like, oh no, battery's dying. No, 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 don't die on me. It's connected. Okay, where was I? Alright, so personifying tarot decks. Okay, what was I saying again? Yeah, so you interpret the tarot, like you interpret the reading or you interpret the messages based on the image themselves. So I feel like it's what the image inspires, it's what the art inspires. It's not necessarily this deck has that personality. Like you would describe the deck as having that personality because that's the personality as conveyed by the images and the symbolism that is within the deck. So yeah, so for me it's just really the language that you use. You would use language that's kind of like personifying and characterizing to talk about a deck. But yeah, like as far as like, is this deck really alive? Does it have a soul? Does it have a consciousness or an actual personality? Not really. I don't really believe that. I don't believe a deck of cards is anything but a deck of cards. A deck of cards is what you make of it. So I guess I'm kind of the middle. You know, I kind of subscribe to the languages that people use when they are talking about a tarot deck when it comes to like personifying a tarot deck. And I also believe that a deck of cards is just a deck of cards. So I think for those of you who don't really understand why people talk about tarot cards in that way, you know, why people use really humanizing languages to talk about tarot cards. So I think part of the reason why is like what I just described is just kind of part of the fun. It's part of viewing something that's lifeless and giving it character. And I think for those of you who don't really understand why people would sort of try to personify their tarot deck, I think part of it is just the language that they use. You know, like when you're doing a tarot reading, it's very interactive, right? It's almost as if you're having a conversation. And whether you believe it to be a conversation with yourself, with your higher self, with your spirit guide, with the deceased one, or anything like that, it feels like a conversation. So I think there's that. It sort of sets up this desire or the tendency or the urge to personify a deck or to kind of talk about it in that way. And also being a writer, being a creative, sometimes you would talk about your, you know, if you're a storyteller, you would talk about your characters, you talk about your story world as something as if they're alive, because they feel alive to you. They're your creations, right? Like if you're an author, you probably know what I mean, right? If you would talk about characters as if they've come to you. You know, a lot of authors do this, right? They will be interviewed, they will be asked questions like, how did you come up with this character? How did you design this character? And often authors would say, oh, so-and-so just came to me in a dream, or they visited me when I was doing this or that. So I think just part of the artistic language, it's just part of the language that you use when you're engaging with artistic things, or when you engage with things that are creative and artistic in nature. So I think part of it is just language. And yeah, I think, and for some people, I think they do believe that a tarot deck is some kind of entity or spirit. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. Let them do them, right? I think everybody has a different tarot practice. If you don't really understand it, you don't really have to understand it to respect it. But I think the only problem that I have with this kind of talk is when someone who practices tarot and places too much emphasis on how a tarot deck is behaving like, and in sort of subjecting themselves to this belief, they sort of give up their personal power to really dictate what they want in a reading, what they're actually seeking, the answers they're seeking, to kind of it almost takes away from that reflective process, the process in which they engage with tarot cards, and they are seeking and they're looking for some illumination or looking for solutions. So the only time where I'll have a problem with this sort of, you know, like personifying is when a person really gives up their personal power and kind of use that as an excuse for not wanting for running away from a problem, or for, I don't know, like it can get ridiculous when you're just saying like, oh, I can't do this because my tarot deck is being a bitch, or I don't know. Like, I think I'm down with like anything. I don't really care what people think and how they practice tarot is their business. I just do my own thing. They can do them. But I think the only time I have a problem with it, I mean, I'm not gonna like confront the person about it, but I think for me it gets a little bit problematic when people give up their personal power using this kind of language. And I think that's the only thing that's the only time where I have trouble with it. But you know, other than that, you know, it's just like, whatever, right? YOLO, you do you, I do me, and the world goes on. So, but yeah, that's my take on personifying tarot cards, and I don't know about you, what do you think? Where are you on the spectrum? Do you believe that your tarot has a spirit? Do you believe that it's a deck of tarot cards? Or are you like me, you're kind of somewhere in the middle, you subscribe to both perspectives, but you don't really like belong to like the two ends, or you're just kind of chill about it. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you like this video, please hit that like button. If you want to see more from me, please hit subscribe, and until next time, be the hero of your own story and keep calm and tarot on.